making the most of the resources and the opportunities available to a student in your socioeconomic position? That is the question. So admissions officers evaluate each application holistically in light of the applicant's context. And so the first way is this idea of geographic context. So when we talk about geographic context, we're talking about, how admissions will look at you in relation to the access opportunities that you had available to you in your geographic location. So if you're coming from, say, New York City, admissions expects you to have made the most of it, but same for the kid in Haiti, okay? Or some other, sort of like location, although the expectations may be a little different because, for example, Haitians have less, availability to resources than maybe some New Yorkers. This is also a reason why under-resourced students are really attractive to schools. They've done more with less. Whereas with New Yorkers, for instance, they have probably likely done less with more. So before I talk about some of the other contexts, Mike, would love to kind of hear your perspective on this idea of geographic context.
I think the most important thing is taking advantage of what your school is able to offer you. In other words, if your school doesn't offer APs, a student can't be penalized for not having APs. If the school does, however, offer a significant number of APs and you shy away from them, and you have classmates from your school applying to the same university, there is certainly going to be a comparison of student to student in terms of, as we've said many times before, the rigor of your curriculum and how you've challenged yourself and being as successful as you can in that particular context. The kid who's from North Dakota, you used Haiti as the example, I'll use North Dakota as the example. When I was at Brown, we may have only had half a dozen applicants from North Dakota, but my direct dean of admissions would say to me, you got to take one because we're going to try to get one student from every one of the 50 states. And that student was probably weaker, no offense to North Dakota, than some of the many students that we turned down from New York City. So from geographical context, it's also how do you make yourself stand out in the geographical pool of where you come from.
Right. And, there's the sort of like, the state context, the regional context, but what you're getting at is this idea of the school context, right? Yes. It's funny, I was talking with a family last week that's in New Jersey about course selection. And, the student's a rising senior. He's a great student. He's got an amazing transcript. He's got great test scores. He's doing incredible things with his resume. And, he was trying to figure out what his last class was going to be for his schedule. And he wanted to take something that was a little less rigorous, both in general, also for him and in relation to the other people in his school. And I said to him, you can do that. But in doing so, you're actually weakening your application profile vis-a-vis all the other kids in your school, because you're not, challenging yourself as much as you could. And, this is a kid who can really kind of probably handle anything. So it was just another kind of reminder that, whether you've got access to 25 APs or one AP, making sure you're taking advantage of all the different opportunities available to you. Because in some ways, what's more impressive, right? The STI kid who takes 10 of 25 available APs, or the kid in North Dakota or Haiti who takes one AP online, self-studies, and gets a 4 or 5 on that test. Do you know what I'm saying? So last piece here on context, this idea of a personal and family context. This is really about resource access, social and financial capital, if I may. Who are your parents, right? If you say that you want to go into business, why haven't you ever stepped foot in your mom's VC firm, or in your dad's consulting office? If you're someone who has means, what are you doing with your resources to help balance cultural inequity? And, mind you, in an engaged way, and that's also kind of hands-on, that does not reinforce your sense of privilege or treat, underadvantaged communities as if they're, anything less than equal to you and equal to, what you're able to bring and contribute to the world. I feel like a lot of times, even pre-COVID, pre-Black Lives Matter, people didn't quite get this, but I'm also seeing too that, in the current sort of social climate, these particular aspects of, an applicant's profile are going to be even more heavily scrutinized. So, Michael, anything to add? Any thoughts on that, or?
Well, you use the expression school context. We used to call it school group. How did you stand in your school group of applicants from your school that applied? And when I was at Brown, in a typical year, we might have 100, 120 applicants from Phillips Andover. And I had to sort through, as part of my docket, to go through all the applicants and put it in a context of the school. And back to what you said, looking at how the student has challenged themselves, what's the rigor that they put into their curriculum. And I did compare them, whether I like to admit it or not. That's the reality of the college admissions process. How do you stand in your school context, or what we mean in your school group? And the same thing, as you said a moment ago, too, in terms of family and personal context. If you have come from a family of privilege, how have you used that for the good of others? I think that's absolutely critical in terms of how colleges are going to look at applicants right now, particularly in light of the times of what we're going through in this country. And again, we're going to talk more about that coming up in the next couple slides. But again, that is going to be absolutely crucial and critical. The kid who just kind of said, well, school shut down, I'll go to class and that's all they do, versus the student who really takes an initiative, shows leadership, goes out and does some community service things to help others, and continues to do it this summer while things are still continuing to go on, I think is totally appropriate.
So, with that, then, you and I both agree that this is the key question to be asking yourself, right? To kind of sum this whole kind of topic of context up into, a single sort of phrase or question, are you making the most of the resources and the opportunities available to a student in your socioeconomic position? That is the question. And I'll also add, in the words of Michael Muska, and are you doing it towards the common good? Right. So, Michael, anything else to say about this before we move on?
I recall when I was in committee at Brown, it was always interesting is that, I was I hate to say this at the time, but I was one of the elders then. God, I'm an elder now, but I was one of the elders in the committee because many admissions officers are often young graduates of the school, that they know the school, but they come in with a different context than people who have been doing admissions for a number of years. And I can remember some of the younger admissions officers sitting around the table and commenting on the fact of, well, this student came from a family of wealth. This student came from a family of privilege. I don't see anything in the record that shows what they really did because of that. The student that, for example, we talk about community service programs. There are community service programs where kids sit on sailboats off an island and then get off the sailboat and go do something for half an hour in the afternoon, and they think that they've done something for community service. Colleges see right through that, okay? Do something in your own backyard. Do something where you can really make a difference.